Hi everyone, welcome to one of GRA's short videos on supply chain. Today I'm excited to be here with Mark Chapman, who has extensive experience in both supply chain and technology, and has extensive experience in retail as well. So welcome, Mark.
Thanks for having me.
Mark, today I'm really keen to discuss with you the short article that we co-authored called The Resilience Imperative, which unpacks supply chain resilience in the post-COVID world. Mark, for those who aren't familiar about supply chain resilience, what is it and why is it in the spotlight?
Yeah, thanks. Look, I think everybody right now is pretty worried about supply chain continuity. I think traditionally we've all been impacted at times in our supply chains by more localized events, whether they were situational, the factory hasn't got power, or there's an environmental impact from a flood, or sometimes we've had political disruptions as well. But they've all tended to be reasonably localized. And whilst painful, they've been pretty short term. Right now, I think the pandemic is worldwide, and it looks to have a long term effect at this point in time. And then when you couple that with the whole China-US trade war and the uncertainty that that's creating, I think we're entering a period where it's getting harder to manage, and people are becoming quite rightly concerned about their supply chain and what it's going to need to look like. And I think it's becoming quite visible at a board level too, probably more so than it ever has. So then you end up with the questions around have we got resilience, and how much resilience should we have? And I think resilience is very much an insurance policy. So how people will respond to this, I think, will differ by industry, and I also think it'll probably differ by businesses within industries as well, depending on sort of what capabilities they have today. So all the questions that are going to come up are, where should I source from? Where should I manufacture? Who should manufacture? Should I manufacture myself? How lean are we today? And do we, what buffers do we actually carry? How critical is the service I offer? Like, is it a life and death service? So when I think particularly at the moment around medical supplies and PPE and all those sorts of supply chains, like the services almost become more important than the cost. So I think all those things will bubble into the equation, and there's no one size fits all answer to this question, and I think it will really differ by business and industry.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Mark. Are there any industries that sort of come to mind for you that the boards are particularly I guess focused on shifting the supply chain model towards resilience?
I think it's probably a conversation happening in every boardroom. It doesn't matter whether you're selling apparel or you're providing PPE. I think you still have customers to serve, and you have shareholders to make happy. So I think it's important that every industry is having this conversation. I suspect some are more ready to have the conversation than others. They're probably more prepared. They probably have smarter systems or smarter process that will enable them to build in resilience in a way that's appropriate and lets them move there more quickly than others. I think there are industries that are probably better placed at the moment, and then there's ones that are obviously are struggling a bit more than others.
It's interesting that you mentioned better place there. What are you alluding to there?
I think that that for whatever reason, whether it's good luck or it's been the investments that they've made, but they've been able to navigate this period of time better than others. And I think even within industries, you'll have winners and losers because they're better set up.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know in the article you mentioned lean versus resilience and trying to find the right balance. In terms of that balance between traditionally supply chains, I guess, have been quite geared towards that lean principle. So let's reduce unit costs, drive economies of scale, etc., etc. As we now look at resilience, I noticed that there's this theme in the article that talks to not wanting to overcorrect. towards that? What sort of the idea there, Mark?
Well, I think you could end up with a knee-jerk reaction, and one that could ultimately be quite expensive. So, if I run a beautifully lean supply chain, built around just-in-time thinking, and I've managed to, probably for every accountant who will listen to this, I've managed to achieve the lowest cost of doing business I possibly can, and with great efficiency and great effectiveness. The knee-jerk reaction would be to do things that disrupt that thinking, to add needless stockpiles, to add additional DCs, to disaggregate your where you source from, so that you lose the power and virtue of volumes. I think all those things are easy to knee-jerk towards, but they may be more than you need, may be unnecessary. So I think it's important that every business considers what level of insurance they want to put into that resilience equation.
And is the messaging there, Mark, that resilience adds complexity
and cost? Yes, absolutely. I think if I was managing one DC and now I've got to manage 10 DCs because that lets me spread my risk, then that adds a lot more planning complexity. So suddenly my planning systems need to be a lot smarter, and maybe I need more planners, so I need more people. So it's just layer after layer. And I think, if one DC should become 2 DCs, that conversation needs to be had so it doesn't become 10 DCs.
Absolutely. I might refer to Chapman's 2x2 here, Mark. Do you mind start walking us through the key principles and the axes potentially here?
Sure. I mean, this was designed to illustrate that lean and resilience and resilient thinking shouldn't be mutually exclusive. I think all of the things that gave us lean and enable lean to happen beautifully is, organizations that have developed, great supply chain visibility. They've optimized all the parts of the business that they really need for their operating model, whether that's labor or inventory or their network. And they work both within their business, traditional S&OP thinking, and together with their partners in a very collaborative way. So, like, if you get to the pinnacle of lean, you probably, you embody all of those things. And I think those things you almost need to double down on when you actually move towards a resilient mindset, because you are going to add complexity that's going to need to be managed. And typically, it's going to be our systems that we turn to help us manage that complexity. So if you have a look at that sort of green arrow, it's kind of suggesting that, whether I'm in that high risk mitigation or high CODB benefit space, I need all these tools to be able to manage that effectively. So, but I need to be able to do it so it's right for me. So it's not this one size fits all. I'm going to add the resilience button to my business. What does resilience need to look like for me? And so it makes sense. The cost I'm putting into my business makes sense. I'm still going to need to make a profit out of this. So it really can't turn me into an unprofitable business. I think that businesses that have worked hard on lean are probably best placed to have these conversations and turn their attention to this. Businesses that we might describe as lazy are, probably on the flip side, are full of potential, because they haven't invested heavily in the capability and the people and the process that will streamline their businesses in the first place. So they've got a longer journey to go on, but it doesn't mean that they can't go on it. And they certainly, I think at the time we're in at the moment, they really need to get on it quickly. Where we've put the industries on here is probably a bit subjective. It's probably there to drive people's thinking more than anything around, do I sit there? Should I sit there? Where do I sit today?
Absolutely. And it's interesting because, as you've mentioned, lean and resilience, they're at competing ends of the quadrants here, but and there's almost a capability pathway that's going diagonally opposite that. Where is the right balance for you is the question that's open-ended in that regard.
Absolutely.
Just in terms of the stages that we're seeing pre and post COVID with resilience, Mark? Do you want to just run through what you've uncovered in that space?
Yeah, look, I mean, we've called out industry sectors again on this slide. You know, and I think it's fair to say that, you know, if you picked retail, for example, you know, there will be some retailers that are at the beginning of this journey, and there will be some that are at the end of the journey. But I think, you know, it's probably, you know, we've thrown the data to board, and, you know, from the various experiences of people in the GRA team, you know, this is where we feel the industries are generally some kind of sitting. So it's from our experience, but it's not meant to be absolute. But the journey that all businesses need to go through, it's been broken out at the bottom of this slide. From the beginning with transactional islands, you know, this tends to be when, yeah, you've got a system, you've got, you know, you can raise purchase orders, you can receipt stock, you can distribute stock. But that kind of, it stops there. Like the data that you've got, you find hard to analyze. You're managing everything. You're not managing by exception, which is a sort of second part of this journey, which is, you know, liberating and enriching and visualizing the data that you've got, using your data smart, bringing it together, bringing data from different systems, from your supplier systems together, to be able to become more, you know, proactive rather than reactive, to be able to help you start to plan more effectively, to help you see what's happening in your supply chain. Once you've got data and you've got quality data, really the world's your oyster. You can take it wherever you want, and that sort of starts to move then into your optimization tools. You know, whether that's labor optimization, inventory optimization, network optimization. There are many tools out there that will help you in a very targeted way focus on parts of your business that can, you know, ideally create value really quickly. These tend to be, you know, bolt-on systems. So, you know, your transactional system, whether you call it your merchandise system or your core system or whatever, you know, it's this great beast that sits there, probably just doing the day-to-day of your business. It's like a filing cabinet more than anything. These tools start to actually really generate the returns and give you the value from reducing your working capital, making sure that when you create rosters, you've got people on at the right time to service your customers, to maximize the penalty rates or whatever it is that you're faced with as a challenge in your industry. So I think, you know, these are the tools when you're actually starting to really think smart and work smart. And then the holy grail is, you know, to have these fully leveraged insights. And I think this is a period when you've got all of these tools and you've got all your systems working together, but you're relentless in your pursuit of trying to find the next thing. Like, how do I leverage that tool a bit more? How do I get a better outcome? It's never letting go, and it's a cycle that just has to keep on occurring, because, you know, costs keep on going up, things keep changing. So, you know, if you're not relentless, you know, I think you start to slide back in your maturity, and people will overtake you within your industry.
Yeah, and what stood out to me there as you were speaking, Mark, is the requirement to be targeted here when you are moving towards resilience. And I guess in acknowledging that shift pre versus post-COVID, where for your business does it make sense to add resilience versus where you might need to still rely on the lean principles to be competitive?
Yeah, and I don't think you can do all things at once. I mean, this is, you know, I mean, this slide isn't saying that somebody in hospitality shouldn't end up in, you know, fully leveraged insights, but it's just a hell of a journey. And so, you know, that maturity process will take time. So, you know, you're going to get a whole lot of value out of liberating, enriching, and visualizing your data and your information. And if your competitors haven't done it, you'll actually have a bit of a competitive advantage. I don't think you've got a competitive advantage these days by just having a transactional system in place. It's kind of like the ticket to play. If you haven't got that, you're not even on the playing field. All these next steps will add value and potentially make you a front runner amongst your peers. But you can't do them all at the same time.
Absolutely, and particularly when operations are a key priority today. Thanks, Mark. Thanks for that. In terms of going forward and the outlook for the future, where do you see the opportunity for supply chain and technology in both the short and longer term?
I think from a supply chain point of view, you know, I think businesses are no doubt going to reevaluate their overall overarching strategies, and I think with that there'll be a need to realign supply chains with any strategy pivots that are going to occur. With that, I think sourcing strategies will go under the microscope, and I think they're going to need to be really well articulated. What are all the trade-offs in those strategies that are going to help us shape logistics strategies and system strategies around that, and it's a conversation that's got to be started today. It will take a while to deliver.
Yeah, absolutely. If you consider how long it's taken us to get to this point, and I guess the level of dependency on some economies like China and some of the imports that we're dependent on for the very little manufacturing that we do today. It is going to take a while, and I suspect government might be quite involved in prioritising some of that investment as well.
And make a call probably on some industries that we need to reshore because we deem it so critical to our national interests. There's other industries like the high-end technology industry, and that ongoing war between China and the US on who can make chips and who can have what chips. To move that sort of industry is going to take years. There is hundreds of billions of dollars invested in capability to manufacture chips in Taiwan and areas like that that you're just not going to pick that up and move it tomorrow. So the disruption that's going to come from that in the short term is actually quite confronting.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark, I think we'll leave it there then, given the time. But for those of you who are interested in reading up more about supply chain resilience, there's the article available on both the GRA LinkedIn page and also the webpage. And Mark, again, thanks so much for your time. I always love the super pragmatic lens that you bring into supply chain and technology. So thanks again.
Thanks.